Galactic Empire challenges Terran fleet. Humanity smiles in amusement. Sci-fi. The massive communications console lit up with a series of blinking lights, and a deep, electronic voice echoed through the room, translating the Imperial text into Terran Common. Admiral Clayton Marshall leaned over the console, reading the words slowly, his brow furrowed. "Citizens of Earth," the message began, "the Galactic Empire acknowledges your presence in the Sol system. Your actions are noted. You are hereby challenged to demonstrate the worth of your fleet. Should you refuse, consequences will be severe." The room was silent for a few seconds. Some officers stared at the screen, their faces pale. Others laughed quietly, unable to take the message seriously. The Galactic Empire was supposed to be the strongest force in the known universe. For them to issue a challenge to humanity seemed almost like a joke. Marshall rubbed his eyes. He had been a human commander for over 20 years and had seen many crises. But the Empire's direct challenge was something new. It was both terrifying and strangely exciting. He turned to Ambassador Leela Grant, who stood at the side of the room, her hands clasped in front of her. "This is not a warning," Leela said carefully. "They are serious. The Empire does not send messages lightly. They will come. They will expect us to respond." Marshall nodded. He had expected that possibility. Humans had grown bold in the last century, exploring the stars and establishing colonies beyond the solar system. Yet the idea that the Empire itself had noticed them and now wanted to test them was a reality no one in the room could ignore. "Very well," he said finally, his voice steady. "We respond, but not with fear. We respond as humans always have, with intelligence, courage, and readiness." The officers in the room exchanged glances. Some were nervous. Others, like Captain Ethan Ross, felt a spark of excitement. Ross had been part of the Terran fleet for 10 years and had served in missions at the edge of the galaxy. He had seen strange worlds, alien species, and dangerous anomalies. But this, the Empire challenging humans directly, was something that made his heart race with anticipation. "Sir," Ross said, stepping forward, "we need to assess their fleet. If they are sending forces this way, we need to know what we are up against. Their numbers, their technology, everything." Marshall agreed. "We start with reconnaissance. We need eyes on their approach before they reach our system. Prepare your team." By the next morning, small Terran ships had begun patrolling the outer edges of the Sol system. They moved quietly, scanning the stars for signs of the incoming Imperial fleet. Ross's team was alert, knowing that even a single misstep could cost lives. Meanwhile, on Earth, civilians watched the news feeds with a mixture of fear and fascination. News anchors tried to explain the situation calmly, but their voices shook slightly. People were not used to thinking of themselves as part of the galaxy at large. Earth had always been considered small, weak, and far from the centers of power. Yet now, humans were being noticed and challenged by the mightiest force in known space. Marshall walked through the fleet's main command hall, observing the activity. Officers monitored ships, prepared supplies, and ran simulations. Engineers checked weapons systems and shields. Every corner of the hall was alive with activity, a quiet hum of organized energy. Leela Grant approached him. "Clayton, I have been studying their previous campaigns," she said, her voice low. "The Empire is very confident. They have never faced a human fleet before and they expect this to be easy, but they underestimate us. They do not know how humans think." Marshall smiled faintly. "That is exactly what we will use to our advantage. Humans have always found ways to survive against larger, stronger opponents. This is no different." Over the next few days, reports came in from the outer patrols. Small signs of the Imperial fleet appeared, a distant glimmer of ships, formations moving slowly in the darkness of space. Ross examined the images carefully. The Empire's vessels were massive, more numerous than anything humans had built. Their technology was advanced and their weapons were powerful, Yet he noticed something. Their formations were rigid. They followed strict patterns almost predictable in their movements. "Sir," Ross said to Marshall during a briefing, "their tactics are old-fashioned. They rely on overwhelming power and structured formations. They are slow to adapt. If we can stay unpredictable, we can survive their first attacks." Marshall nodded. "Good, we will use that. Prepare our smaller ships for speed and flexibility. Our strength is not in sheer numbers but in how humans fight. We improvise, we adapt, we never stand still." As the days passed, the Terran fleet worked tirelessly. Simulations ran continuously, with humans practicing evasive maneuvers, coordinating attacks, and testing new strategies. Lieutenant Sarah Blake suggested using smaller, faster ships to outmaneuver the Empire's larger vessels. Her plan was simple but clever. Human ships would use hit-and-run tactics, avoid direct confrontation with the enemy's biggest guns, and force the Imperial commanders to make mistakes. "Humans are always underestimated," she said during a strategy session. "They think we fight like them, direct, rigid, predictable, but we don't. We think differently, we improvise, we smile while facing danger. That is our real strength." Marshall smiled at her words. "Exactly. This is not just a battle, it is a lesson. They will learn that humans are not what they expect." Meanwhile, the Empire's fleet moved closer to the Sol system. Their ships glinted in the distance, enormous in size and terrifying in presence. The human reconnaissance ships kept watch, sending back detailed reports of their formations, their weapons, and their movements. Each report was analyzed carefully. The Terran fleet studied every weakness, every predictable pattern. They learned how to anticipate the Empire's actions without revealing too much about themselves. Back on Earth, people prepared for the unknown. Citizens trained in emergency drills, hospitals prepared for potential casualties, and industries focused on producing supplies for the fleet. Fear was present, of course, but alongside it was a strange sense of pride. Humans were being recognized by the galaxy. For centuries, Earth had been considered insignificant, but now, every human being felt the weight of history on their shoulders. Ross and his team made a daring decision. They sent a small group of scouts close to the Imperial fleet, close enough to gather data on their ships, weapons, and defenses. It was risky. The scouts could be destroyed at any moment, but they moved quickly, using every advantage that human ingenuity provided. Using decoys and careful maneuvering, they returned with detailed information about the Empire's ships. "Impressive work," Marshall said as he examined the reports. "We now know how they fight and, more importantly, how they can be beaten. Their confidence will be their weakness." As the days passed, the mood among the Terran fleet shifted. Fear became focus. Anxiety became determination. Humans had faced disasters before, natural and man-made, and had always found ways to overcome them. Now, facing the might of the Galactic Empire, they approached the challenge with the same mindset. Ross walked through the fleet hangar, watching engineers and pilots prepare ships. Each vessel was small compared to the Empire's massive battleships, but every ship was fast, flexible, and ready. Humans had designed them not to match the enemy in size, but to outsmart them. "I have to admit," Ross said to a fellow captain, Jason Lee, "this is going to be interesting. They think this is going to be easy. They have no idea what we can do." Jason smiled. "Let them underestimate us. That will make victory all the sweeter." Marshall convened a meeting of his top officers. They discussed strategies, analyzed intelligence, and prepared contingency plans. They knew the first contact with the Empire could determine the course of the battle, but they also knew that humans thrived on challenges. Where others saw hopeless odds, humans saw opportunity. On the final night before the expected arrival of the Imperial fleet, the officers gathered in the observation deck. Stars stretched endlessly across the blackness of space, and somewhere out there, the Empire's ships moved closer. The tension in the room was thick, but it was accompanied by a strange sense of excitement. Humans were about to face a test unlike any other. Marshall stood silently for a moment, gazing at the stars. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "we show them what it means to face humanity. We do not cower, we do not beg. We fight with our minds, with our courage, and with our unity. We will surprise them. And above all, we will smile." The officers nodded, feeling the weight of his words. Humans had survived against impossible odds before, and they would survive again. The stars beyond the Sol system were about to witness something new, something the Empire had not prepared for. And somewhere deep in the void, the Empire's fleet continued its steady approach, unaware that the humans waiting for them were ready not just to fight, but to redefine the meaning of battle itself. The Terran fleet moved quietly through the outer edges of the Sol system. Small ships darted between asteroids and planetoids, scanning for any sign of the Imperial fleet. Captain Ethan Ross led the reconnaissance team. His eyes scanned every sensor reading, every flicker of light. Every movement mattered. "Sir," Lieutenant Sarah Blake said, pointing to a screen, "we've picked up several clusters of large ships moving steadily toward the system. They are heavily armed, but they move slowly. Their formation is very tight. They are not expecting us to interfere." Ross nodded. "Good. That gives us time. We need to study them carefully. Every pattern they follow, every maneuver they make, we must record. This is our advantage." The smaller human ships moved closer, keeping themselves hidden in the shadows of distant planets. Using stealth technology, they slipped through the gaps in the Imperial fleet without being detected. Ross and his team could see the Empire's ships clearly now. They were massive, glinting steel giants that seemed to stretch for kilometers. Each vessel had dozens of weapon emplacements, shields that glowed faintly in the darkness, and sensors that could detect the smallest movement. "Impressive," Ross said, his voice calm. "But there is a weakness. Look at their formations. Every ship stays in its exact position. They are predictable. That will work to our advantage." Lieutenant Natalie Brooks leaned over the console. "They rely too much on size and power. They do not adapt quickly. Humans are faster, smarter, and more flexible. If we can stay unpredictable, we can confuse them." Marshall watched quietly from the command deck. He had a calm expression, but inside he felt the familiar tension that came before a battle. He knew humans thrived under pressure. Where others saw danger, humans saw opportunity. That was why the Terran fleet could face the Empire without fear. Meanwhile, on Earth, people watched news feeds about the approaching Imperial fleet. Citizens felt a mix of fear and excitement. For the first time in history, humans were being noticed by the galaxy's most powerful force. People discussed the fleet's movements, shared strategies, and wondered what it would be like to face a civilization far older and stronger than their own. Ross ordered the reconnaissance ships to take more daring positions. They needed closer views of the enemy ships, weapon systems, shields, and communication patterns. The smaller Terran ships weaved in and out of asteroid fields, taking advantage of natural cover. They moved with speed and precision, almost like dancers in space. "Report," Ross said, watching the screens. Lieutenant Blake's voice came through. "We've scanned the Imperial weapons. Their energy cannons have a slow recharge time. Their missile systems are powerful but follow predictable paths. If we hit them from unexpected angles, we can avoid most of their firepower." Marshall nodded. "Perfect. Begin training our fleet with these patterns. We need every pilot to understand these weaknesses. Knowledge is our best weapon." The next day, the Terran fleet held a series of training exercises. Small groups of ships practiced maneuvers designed to confuse the Empire. They simulated attacks from multiple angles, feints, and decoy maneuvers. Humans were fast learners. Each pilot added small adjustments, improving every formation and every tactic. Lieutenant Brooks suggested another idea. "What if we use our ships in swarms?" The Empire expects one attack at a time. If we send many small groups simultaneously, they won't be able to respond quickly enough. Ross considered it. Yes, that is risky, but it could work. We need to be careful. Every move must be calculated. Humans win because we think faster than our enemies, not just because we fight bravely. As the Imperial fleet continued its approach, tension rose among the officers. They knew the first contact could decide everything. Marshall called a meeting to discuss strategy. "Listen carefully," he said. "The Empire believes size and firepower are everything. They are wrong. Humans have intelligence, creativity, and courage. We will not fight like they expect. We will strike where they do not expect. We will adapt faster than they can respond. And above all, we will not panic." The officers listened carefully. They trusted Marshall. Humans had faced impossible odds before and survived. Now they would do it again, against the mightiest fleet the galaxy had ever known. Ross led a small team on a close reconnaissance mission. They approached one of the Imperial carriers, hidden in the shadow of an asteroid. Using stealth systems, they scanned the ship's weapons, engines, and shields. Data streamed in rapidly, and Ross carefully recorded every detail. "We have what we need," he said. "Now it's time to plan." Back on the Liberty Star, Marshall and his officers reviewed the data. They found several weaknesses in the Imperial ships. The slow recharge of their energy cannons meant brief windows to strike safely. Their missile systems followed predictable paths, which could be exploited. Their shields were strong but could be temporarily disrupted by coordinated attacks. "This is good," Marshall said. "We can survive this. We can even win," Lieutenant Blake smiled. "And the best part, they do not know humans can think this way. They expect fear, not strategy. That will be our secret weapon." The next days were filled with preparation. Pilots ran drills continuously. Engineers worked day and night to ensure weapons, shields, and engines were at peak performance. Every officer, sailor, and crew member understood the importance of the mission. Humanity was about to meet the Empire head-on, and they had to be ready. Ross and his team continued to scout the Imperial fleet. They discovered that the enemy relied heavily on their main command ships for coordination. If humans could disrupt the command chain, the Empire's formations would collapse. "Sir," Ross said during a briefing, "if we can target the command ships first, we can confuse the entire fleet. They will be forced to react, and that is when we strike hard." Marshall nodded. "Exactly. That will be our plan, but it will require precision and courage. Every ship must act in perfect coordination." As the Imperial fleet drew closer, tension in the Terran fleet rose. Some officers were nervous, but most were ready. Humans had always faced danger with a mix of intelligence and courage. This was no different. On Earth, people watched news feeds with bated breath. Citizens gathered in squares, homes, and public places. They discussed what they had learned from the fleet's broadcasts. Children asked questions, and parents tried to answer with hope in their voices. Humanity was about to face a trial that would test every skill, every strategy, and every ounce of courage. Ross gathered his pilots for a final briefing before the first encounter. "Listen," he said, "the Empire expects us to run, to hide, to surrender. We will not. We fight smart, not just hard. Use your speed. Use your minds. Watch each other's backs. And remember, we are human. We adapt, we improvise, and we survive." The pilots nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. They knew the first battle would be dangerous, but they also knew they had an advantage. The enemy did not understand them. As the first human ships prepared to engage, Marshall watched from the Liberty Star. He felt a strange mix of fear and pride. Humans were small compared to the Imperial fleet, but their strength lay in their creativity, courage, and unity. The stars beyond the Sol system were about to witness something new, something the Empire would not expect. And somewhere, far ahead, the Imperial fleet continued its steady approach, confident in its power, unaware that humans were ready to change the course of history. Ross's reconnaissance team reported the positions of enemy ships. Every detail mattered. The first contact would not just be a test of strength, it would be a test of strategy, intelligence, and courage. "Prepare the formations," Marshall ordered. "We strike where they are weakest. We move fast, think faster, and above all, we remain unpredictable. That is how humans win." The Terran fleet moved quietly into position. Small ships darted between asteroids, ready to strike at the perfect moment. The Empire was still unaware of what was coming. Marshall's voice was calm but firm. "Remember, this is more than a battle. It is a statement. The galaxy has underestimated humanity for too long. Today, we show them who we are." And with that, the Terran fleet waited, ready to face the might of the Galactic Empire, confident in their courage, intelligence, and human spirit. The first encounter was about to begin, and humanity's smile in the face of danger would mark the beginning of a story the galaxy would never forget. The first glimmer of Imperial ships appeared on the outer sensors before dawn. Captain Ethan Ross leaned over the display, watching the massive fleet moving slowly but steadily toward the Sol system. The sheer size of their vessels made human ships look like tiny specks, but Ross felt no fear. He knew humans had one advantage the Empire had not considered: unpredictability. "Sir," Lieutenant Sarah Blake said, pointing to the screen, "they're moving in the same rigid formation we predicted. They don't expect us to do anything different." Ross smiled. "Good. That means we are ready. Begin the attack drills one last time. Every pilot, every ship, follow the plan precisely, but stay ready to improvise." Admiral Clayton Marshall watched from the Liberty Star's command deck. His calm eyes scanned the data streams. He had studied the Empire for weeks and understood one truth: their strength lay in size and firepower, but their weakness was in thinking. Humans thought differently. Humans adapted. Humans smiled while facing danger. The first contact began when small Terran ships darted from the shadows of an asteroid belt. They were fast, nimble, and quiet. The Empire's scouts detected them late. By then, it was too late. Human ships appeared in multiple directions, striking at the edges of the Imperial formation. "Attack!" Ross's voice came through comms, firm and clear. "Stay unpredictable, hit and run, watch each other's backs." Small groups of human ships circled around the massive Imperial vessels, firing precise bursts of energy. The Empire responded, but their slow energy cannons and predictable missile paths made them easy targets for the fast human ships. Lieutenant Natalie Brooks monitored the engagement from the Liberty Star. "They are hitting us with everything they have, but they cannot target our small ships quickly enough. Our speed is keeping them off balance." As the battle unfolded, human ingenuity became clear. Smaller ships created decoys, drawing Imperial fire away from the main Terran forces. Ross's squadron weaved between the larger ships, hitting critical engines and weapon systems before retreating to safety. One Imperial battleship fired a massive energy cannon at a group of human ships. The beam illuminated the darkness of space, powerful enough to vaporize smaller vessels in seconds. But the Terran pilots had anticipated it. They had observed the weapon's recharge patterns and moved in bursts, dodging between volleys. The cannon fired again, but each time the humans slipped past, unscathed. "Impressive," Marshall said quietly. "They thought they could crush us with raw power. They are learning too late that humans do not fight like anyone else." Ross led a daring maneuver toward the center of the Imperial formation. A group of human ships targeted a massive carrier that controlled communication between the fleet's vessels. Using stealth technology and precision attacks, they disabled the carrier's shields and critical systems. "Carrier down," Ross shouted over the comms. "They won't know what hit them." With their command ship disrupted, the Empire's fleet began to falter. Smaller ships collided in confusion. Energy beams missed their targets, and missile volleys went astray. The humans were relentless, striking from unexpected angles and retreating before the enemy could respond. Lieutenant Blake grinned as she directed her squadron. "They are panicking, keep the pressure on. Never let them think they are in control." Back on Earth, citizens watched live feeds of the engagement. Fear had turned into awe. People cheered as images of small human ships outmaneuvering enormous Imperial vessels flashed across the screens. Humanity, they realized, was not just surviving, it was dominating through clever tactics and courage. "Humans are unbelievable," said one news anchor, shaking his head. "They face the Empire's largest ships with nothing but small fighters and strategy, and they are winning." Ross noticed another opportunity. The Empire had a formation of warships protecting a massive battleship. It was the core of their firepower. If humans could disable it, the entire fleet might retreat. He coordinated with Lieutenant Brooks and Lieutenant Blake to create a feint attack, drawing the protective ships away. "Go now," Ross commanded. His squadron darted toward the battleship, invisible in the shadows until the last moment. They fired concentrated energy pulses at the ship's engines and weapon systems, then pulled back into the safety of the asteroid belt. The battleship shuddered as its systems overloaded. Alarms blared across the Imperial fleet. The protective ships scrambled to return, but it was too late. The human attack had already caused significant damage. Marshall allowed himself a small smile. That is exactly how humans win. They use brains over brawn, speed over size, and courage over fear. The Empire was forced to regroup. Their rigid formations and slow reactions made them vulnerable. Human ships, small and fast, moved like shadows, striking at weak points and retreating before the enemy could respond. Each strike caused more confusion, more panic. Lieutenant Brooks analyzed the battlefield. They cannot adjust quickly. Their command chain is disrupted. "We have the upper hand. Now we press it." Ross's squadron prepared for another strike. This time, they focused on the enemy's missile batteries. Using synchronized attacks, they destroyed the weapons in seconds. The Imperial fleet's ability to respond was crippled. "Keep moving," Ross ordered. "Never stop, we strike where they least expect it." The battle continued for hours. Humans used every tactic they had practiced: swarming attacks, decoys, feints, and precision strikes. Every move was calculated. Every pilot trusted the others. The Imperial fleet, though massive, was slow and rigid. They were confused, frustrated, and increasingly desperate. On the Liberty Star, Marshall observed the battlefield. He saw human ships appearing where they should not have been, striking at weak points no one else would notice. He saw courage and intelligence combined in a way that only humans could manage. "They cannot believe it," Marshall said quietly. "They thought they could dominate us with size alone. They do not understand humans." As the first day of battle ended, the Imperial fleet began to retreat slightly, regrouping in the darkness of space. The humans, though tired, held their positions. They had not been defeated. They had not lost a single major ship. In fact, they had inflicted significant damage on the Empire. Ross took a moment to look at the stars. They were quiet now, but he knew the battle was far from over. "This is only the beginning," he said to his squadron. "The Empire is powerful, but they do not know us. We fight differently, and that is why we will win." Lieutenant Blake grinned. "They will remember today. They will remember that humans are unpredictable, clever, and fearless. They may have ships that dwarf ours, but they do not have our spirit." Back on Earth, celebrations were muted but full of pride. Citizens knew the Terran fleet had faced the Empire directly and survived. News anchors described the human tactics, the bravery of the pilots, and the clever strategies that had turned the tide of the first battle. "This is a historic moment," one reporter said. "For the first time, humans have faced the Galactic Empire and proven that size and power are not everything. Intelligence, creativity, and courage matter more than anyone realized." The Imperial fleet, meanwhile, was in disarray. Commanders argued, trying to find a way to regain control. Their massive ships were powerful, but they had underestimated the humans. They did not understand their adaptability, their speed, or their courage. Ross and his team rested briefly in the asteroid shadows, preparing for the next day. Every pilot was exhausted, but spirits were high. They had faced the might of the Empire and had not only survived but dominated through clever tactics. Marshall walked among the crew of the Liberty Star. "Remember this," he said. "Humans do not fight like anyone else. We think differently, we act quickly, and we never give up. That is what makes us strong. Today, we have shown the galaxy that humans are not weak. We are clever, adaptable, and fearless." As night fell over the Sol system, the Terran fleet regrouped. Small ships repaired minor damage, pilots rested, and officers planned the next strike. The first encounter had proven that humans could face the Empire and survive, but more battles would come. Ross looked at the stars again, thinking about the Empire's mistakes. They had relied on size and firepower, assuming humans would react like every other civilization they had faced. They had not considered human ingenuity, human courage, or human adaptability. That would be their downfall. Lieutenant Brooks approached him. "They will come back stronger," she said. "But so will we. We have learned from today and we know our strength." Ross nodded. "Exactly. Humans fight differently. That is our advantage. The Empire cannot predict us. They cannot control us, and they will never break us." The stars were calm now, but the galaxy had changed. The Terran fleet had smiled in the face of danger and shown the Empire that humans were not to be underestimated. And somewhere far ahead, the Imperial fleet prepared for another engagement, unaware that the humans they thought were weak had just shown them what true courage and intelligence could accomplish. The morning after the first encounter, the Terran fleet was already moving into new positions. Captain Ethan Ross stood on the Liberty Star's command deck, looking out at the dark void of space. The Imperial fleet was regrouping, but it would not be long before they tried again. Humans had won the first engagement, but the battle was far from over. "Sir," Lieutenant Sarah Blake said, pointing to a large holographic display, "the Empire is repairing their ships. They are trying to reorganize their formations, but they are still slow. We have the advantage if we act quickly." Ross nodded. "Good. We strike before they regain their strength. Today, we make them understand that humans are not easy to defeat." Admiral Clayton Marshall walked toward him. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "Remember, Ethan, the Empire will come back stronger. They may have the numbers and the size, but they cannot think like us. That is our strength. We do not just fight. We adapt, we surprise, and we never stop moving." Ross looked at the display again. The Imperial ships were massive, their weapons deadly. But their formation was rigid and their reactions were slow. Humans had learned their patterns, and today they would exploit them fully. "Prepare the squadrons," Marshall ordered. "We will hit their command centers first, then disrupt their weapons and engines. Keep the pressure constant. We strike, retreat, and strike again. Never give them a moment to think clearly." Small Terran ships moved quickly, darting between asteroids and planetoids. Engineers worked tirelessly to repair minor damage from the previous battle. Pilots ran final checks on weapons and shields. Every human ship, though small compared to the Empire's massive vessels, was prepared for precision strikes. Lieutenant Natalie Brooks studied the Imperial fleet carefully. "Their central command ships are still damaged," she said. "If we hit them again, we can disrupt their coordination completely. Their massive ships will not know how to react." Ross smiled. "That is our plan. Focus on their weak points, move fast, and never fight predictably. That is how humans win." The first strike began when a small group of Terran ships approached the Imperial fleet from an unexpected angle. Using stealth technology, they moved quietly through the void, appearing suddenly near the enemy's command vessels. Energy pulses struck the ship's engines and communication systems. Alarms blared, but the humans were already retreating, disappearing behind the cover of asteroids. Again and again, Ross commanded. Hit where it hurts and retreat before they can respond. Lieutenant Blake directed another squadron, targeting the Empire's weapon platforms. Humans moved like shadows, precise and unpredictable. Each strike caused more confusion. The Imperial fleet fired, but their slow response meant they missed most of the fast human ships. Marshall watched the battle unfold. He could see the Empire becoming frustrated, their ships colliding and misfiring. "They rely too much on size," he said quietly. "They cannot adjust to humans who fight with intelligence and speed. That is why we win." The Terran fleet continued the assault. Ross led a daring maneuver toward the center of the Imperial formation. A small group of human ships targeted the main battleship, the core of the Empire's firepower. Using coordinated energy strikes, they disabled critical weapon systems and engines. The battleship shuddered, unable to respond to attacks effectively. "Focus all attacks on the command ships," Ross ordered. "We remove their leadership and the rest will fall into chaos." Lieutenant Brooks monitored the energy flows of the enemy ships. "Their shields are weakening after repeated strikes. If we push now, we can cripple their fleet completely." The human squadrons moved quickly, coordinating their attacks like a well-practiced dance. Missiles, energy pulses, and decoys all worked together to confuse the enemy. The Imperial fleet struggled to react. Their massive ships, powerful as they were, could not match the speed and cleverness of the humans. Ross and his team created a trap. Smaller human ships appeared in one area, drawing the Empire's fire. Then, larger squadrons struck from behind, hitting the command vessels and weapon platforms simultaneously. The result was immediate and devastating. "Command ships are down," Lieutenant Blake shouted. "They cannot coordinate their forces." Marshall allowed himself a small smile. "This is exactly what we planned. Humans do not fight like anyone else. They think, adapt, and act with courage. That is why we win." The Imperial fleet tried to regroup, but their formations had been broken. Massive ships collided, some firing at each other by mistake. Confusion spread through the enemy ranks. Humans, small and fast, struck repeatedly, causing more damage. Lieutenant Brooks noticed another weakness. "Their engines are vulnerable when their shields are down. We can disable their mobility and trap them." Ross nodded. "Do it. Hit the engines, then retreat. Let them drift in space, powerless and confused." The human squadrons moved like shadows, striking engines, then disappearing into asteroid fields. The Imperial fleet was in chaos. Ships drifted, collided, and misfired. Humans had turned the battle decisively in their favor. On Earth, citizens watched the battle feeds with growing excitement. People cheered as images of human ships outmaneuvering enormous Imperial vessels flashed across the screens. The news anchors were amazed. "Humans are winning against the Empire's largest ships," one said. "They are clever, fast, and fearless. No one expected this." Back in space, Ross coordinated another attack. This time, the human ships focused on the Imperial fleet's remaining missiles and energy cannons. Using synchronized strikes, they disabled weapon after weapon, leaving the massive ships unable to fire effectively. "Keep the pressure on," Ross commanded. "Do not let them recover. We fight smart, move fast, and strike again and again." The Empire's commanders were furious. They had expected humans to flee, to hide, to surrender. Instead, humans fought with intelligence and courage. The Imperial fleet, though massive, could not adapt quickly enough. Their weapons were powerful, but humans had found ways to avoid every strike. Lieutenant Blake guided a squadron to target the largest battleship in the fleet. Using stealth, they approached from behind and fired concentrated energy pulses at critical points. The ship shuddered and then went dark. Alarms echoed across the fleet, but the humans were already gone. Marshall nodded. "That is exactly what I wanted. We strike the strongest ships first, break their command, and then let chaos work in our favor. Humans are clever. That is why we win." Ross and his pilots moved quickly, coordinating strikes with precision. Smaller ships distracted, decoyed, and feinted, while larger squadrons struck critical targets. The Imperial fleet was powerless to respond effectively. Their massive ships drifted helplessly, engines damaged, weapons disabled, and command disrupted. "Look at them," Lieutenant Brooks said, her eyes wide. "They cannot recover. They are disorganized. We have them completely." The humans pressed their advantage. They hit every weak point they could find, never pausing. Their speed and intelligence allowed them to avoid most enemy fire, while their attacks caused maximum damage. The Imperial fleet, though larger and stronger, was collapsing under the clever tactics of humans. Ross led a daring maneuver to capture one of the enemy's smaller carriers. The plan was to disable it and use it to hold the remaining enemy ships in place. Using careful coordination, humans disabled the carrier's engines and weapon systems. The massive ship drifted, useless, as human pilots moved to new positions. Marshall allowed himself a rare smile. "This is how humans fight," he said quietly. "Not with fear, not with brute force, but with intelligence, creativity, and courage. That is why we win." The Empire's remaining ships began to retreat, trying to regroup and escape, but the humans did not allow it. Smaller squadrons struck from multiple angles, disabling engines and weapons. The Imperial fleet was in full retreat, their confidence shattered. Ross looked at the battlefield. The humans had done what no one thought possible. They had faced the mightiest fleet in the galaxy and had not only survived but had turned the battle decisively in their favor. Lieutenant Blake smiled. "They underestimated us. They thought we would run or hide. They do not understand humans." Marshall walked among the crews of the Liberty Star. "Remember this," he said. "We do not fight like anyone else. We think, we adapt, and we act with courage. That is what makes humans strong. Today, we have shown the Empire what that means." On Earth, citizens celebrated. People knew the Terran fleet had turned the battle decisively against the Empire. News feeds showed images of small human ships outmaneuvering massive vessels, of clever tactics that caused chaos among enemy ranks. Humans had shown courage, intelligence, and ingenuity, and the galaxy was watching. Ross gathered his squadron for a final briefing. "Today we won a great victory, but the Empire will come back. They will try again. We must be ready. We fight not just with our ships, but with our minds, our courage, and our unity. That is how humans always win." The stars were calm now, but the galaxy had changed. Humans had faced the Empire directly and had turned the battle decisively in their favor. The Imperial fleet had learned a lesson. Humans were not weak, predictable, or easily defeated. They were clever, brave, and relentless. And somewhere far ahead, the Empire's commanders planned their next move, unaware that the humans they had underestimated were ready for anything. The Terran fleet had shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of, and that would be remembered for generations. The stars were calm over the Sol system, but the Terran fleet knew the battle was not yet over. The Imperial fleet had retreated after suffering heavy losses, but humans understood that the Empire would return. Captain Ethan Ross stood on the Liberty Star's command deck, watching the distant lights of the enemy fleet fade into darkness. "They are retreating," Lieutenant Sarah Blake said, her voice calm but excited. "They will regroup and come back, but we have the upper hand now. We have shown them what humans can do." Admiral Clayton Marshall nodded. "Yes. Today we won a great victory, but the fight is not over. The Empire will try again. We must be ready." Ross turned to Lieutenant Natalie Brooks, who was reviewing the battle data. "Natalie, what do you see?" Brooks looked up, her eyes bright with determination. "Their command ships are badly damaged, their weapons are weakened, and their formations are broken. If we strike again, we can force them to retreat completely. We can show the galaxy that humans are not just clever but unstoppable when united. Marshall considered this. It is risky, but it may be the only way to end this without more bloodshed. We strike intelligently, quickly, and decisively. We give them no chance to recover. Ross called a meeting of all the fleet commanders. They discussed every detail of the Imperial fleet's weaknesses, their predictable patterns, and the best ways to exploit them. Small squadrons would attack engines, decoy maneuvers would confuse the enemy, and coordinated strikes would target weapons and command ships simultaneously. Every ship must act together, Ross said. We are small compared to their numbers, but humans are clever, adaptable, and brave. That is our advantage. We strike smart, we strike fast, and we never stop moving. The Terran fleet moved into position near a distant asteroid belt, using its shadows for cover. Small ships darted between rocks, while larger vessels remained hidden. The Imperial fleet, unaware that humans had learned from the previous battles, approached confidently, believing they still had the upper hand. Ross led the first wave of human ships. They moved quickly, striking at the enemy's engines to slow them down. Energy pulses from small human fighters hit massive battleships, causing them to drift helplessly. Missiles fired at human ships missed by wide margins, unable to track their swift movements. Lieutenant Blake directed the squadrons with precision. Focus on their weapons, disable the cannons and turrets, keep the pressure constant. Humans struck again and again, moving unpredictably. The Imperial fleet, massive as it was, could not adjust to the speed and intelligence of the Terran fleet. Their command structure had been damaged in earlier battles, and confusion spread through the ranks. "Look at them," Brooks said, monitoring the enemy fleet. "They cannot respond properly. Their formations are collapsing. They do not know what to do," Ross grinned. "That is the power of human ingenuity. They rely on strength, but we rely on thinking, speed, and coordination." The Terran fleet continued to press the attack. Squadrons targeted the remaining command ships and carriers. Using stealth and careful coordination, humans disabled engines, weapons, and communication systems. The massive vessels drifted helplessly, unable to fire or maneuver. Marshall observed the battle calmly. "This is exactly how humans fight. We do not panic, we do not act foolishly, and we do not rely on size alone. We think, we adapt, and we act with courage. That is why we win." On Earth, citizens watched the live feeds with awe and excitement. People cheered as images of small human ships taking down enormous Imperial vessels appeared on the screens. Schools and workplaces paused as news channels broadcasted every detail of the battle. Humanity had faced the Empire and was now proving its strength to the entire galaxy. Ross noticed another opportunity. A cluster of Imperial ships tried to flee toward a nearby star system. He ordered a coordinated strike. Small groups of ships cut off escape routes, while others disabled engines and weapons. Within minutes, the remaining enemy vessels were trapped, unable to move or fight effectively. Lieutenant Brooks smiled. "They cannot escape. Every move we make is calculated. We have them completely." Ross nodded. "Now we push for the final strike. We finish this battle, not with arrogance, but with precision and courage. We show them that humans are not weak, and we do it carefully, without unnecessary risk." The Terran fleet launched their final coordinated attack. Human ships struck at critical points on the Imperial vessels simultaneously. Engines, shields, weapons, and command systems. Explosions lit the darkness of space. Massive ships shuddered and alarms blared across the enemy fleet. "Command ships are down," Lieutenant Blake shouted. "They cannot coordinate anything. The rest of the fleet is helpless." Marshall allowed himself a small smile. "That is it. Humans win not because we have the largest ships or the most weapons, but because we think, adapt, and act together. That is the essence of humanity." The Imperial fleet, seeing no chance of victory, began to retreat in disorder. Massive ships drifted, some colliding with each other. Smaller ships tried to escape, but human squadrons blocked every route. Within hours, the Empire had lost more than half its fleet, and the remainder fled, broken and confused. Ross and his pilots regrouped near the asteroid belt. Their ships were worn from battle, but spirits were high. They had faced the mightiest force in the galaxy and had not only survived but had achieved a decisive victory. "Humans do not fight like anyone else," Ross said quietly to his squadron. "We do not panic. We do not follow rules blindly. We think, adapt, and act together. That is why we won." Lieutenant Brooks added, "They will not forget this. The Empire underestimated us, and now the galaxy knows the truth. Humans are clever, brave, and strong." Back on Earth, celebrations erupted. People filled streets, squares, and homes, cheering for the Terran fleet. Schools held impromptu lessons about human courage and ingenuity. News channels broadcasted images and videos from the fleet, showing small human ships outmaneuvering enormous Imperial vessels. Humanity had proven its strength, not just through weapons, but through intelligence, strategy, and courage. Admiral Marshall addressed the fleet. "Today, we have faced the greatest threat the galaxy has ever posed to humanity. We have shown them that humans are not weak, not predictable, and not afraid. We have won because we think, adapt, and act together. This is the true power of humanity." Ross and his squadron repaired their ships and prepared for the next possible engagement. Even though the Empire had retreated, humans knew they must remain vigilant. But for now, the victory was theirs. They had faced the impossible and had triumphed. "Look at what we have done," Lieutenant Blake said, watching the stars. "We faced the Empire and survived. We showed the galaxy what humans can do when we work together, think smart, and never give up." Marshall smiled. "Yes, the galaxy has seen the truth. Humanity is clever, brave, and unstoppable when united. This is only the beginning, but today we have made history." The stars above the Sol system were calm once more. The Imperial fleet had been forced to retreat, humiliated by a smaller, smarter, and braver opponent. Humans had proven that strength alone was not enough. Intelligence, courage, and unity were what truly mattered. Ross looked at the fleet around him. Pilots, engineers, officers, and crew members were tired but proud. They had done what many thought impossible. They had turned the tide of a battle against the most powerful force in the galaxy. Lieutenant Brooks joined him. "They will not underestimate us again," she said. "They will remember today, and so will the rest of the galaxy." Ross nodded. "Yes, and humanity will continue to grow, learn, and explore. We fight differently, we think differently, and we survive where others fail. That is our strength." Back on Earth, people celebrated long into the night. Cities lit up with fireworks and lights, streets were filled with cheering crowds, and everywhere there was a sense of pride and wonder. Humans had faced the galaxy's greatest power and had shown that they were capable of greatness. Admiral Marshall looked at the stars one last time that night. "We have proven something important," he said quietly to himself. "Humans are not weak. We do not follow the rules of others. We think, adapt, and overcome. That is the essence of humanity." The Terran fleet rested, repaired, and prepared for the future. The Empire would come again as they always did, but humans were ready. They had shown the galaxy that courage, intelligence, and unity could overcome any threat. Captain Ross and his squadron stood together on the Liberty Star's deck, looking out at the stars. "We did it," Ross said. "We faced the Empire and survived. We fought smart, we fought bravely, and we showed the galaxy who we are." Lieutenant Blake smiled. "Yes, we are humans. We adapt, we think, and we never give up. That is our power. That is why we win." The stars stretched endlessly above them, silent witnesses to humanity's triumph. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humans were not to be underestimated. They were clever, brave, and unstoppable when united. And somewhere far beyond the Sol system, the remnants of the Imperial fleet retreated. knowing that they had faced a civilization that would not be conquered easily. Humanity had proven its strength, intelligence, and courage, and the galaxy would never forget it. The Terran fleet had smiled in the face of danger and had emerged victorious. The Empire had been humbled, humanity had triumphed, and the stars themselves seemed to celebrate the courage, ingenuity, and unstoppable spirit of Earth's people.